Everyone is watching the security fight. Everyone is asking the same obvious questions. Will Prince Harry get the protection he wants? Will Meghan travel with him? Will Archie and Lilibet be brought to the United Kingdom? Will King Charles finally see his grandchildren again after all this time? But there is another question hiding underneath all of that. And it may be the question that decides everything. What if the most important person in this story is not Harry, not Charles, and not even William? What if the person quietly trying to move the entire family toward a reunion is Kate? Because this early July visit, the window everyone is watching between July 6th and July 10th, is not just another royal trip. It is not just another round of headlines about security, court battles, old wounds, and palace tension. It may be one of the last realistic openings for something very simple, very human, and very difficult. A meeting. Not a public balcony moment. Not a staged family photo. Not a carefully written palace statement about peace and understanding. A real meeting between Prince William and the children of Prince Harry. Archie and Lilibet have grown up mostly outside the royal world. They have grown up away from Britain, away from palace routines, away from the cousins and grandparents and uncles whose names are known around the world. And William, by all public accounts, has not had a meaningful relationship with them for years. That is the emotional center of this story. Because, if the reports are right, Kate is not simply watching from the side. She is not just hoping the brothers eventually find their way back to each other. She is quietly trying to make something happen before this small window closes. And that changes the whole story. For months, maybe even years, the royal family narrative has felt frozen. Harry on one side, William on the other, Charles somewhere in the middle, wounded as a father but limited as a king. Meghan and the children far away in California. Kate publicly composed, careful, rarely saying more than she needs to say. But now, the pressure is different. This is not a vague hope for reconciliation someday. This is a possible decision in a matter of days. Either the family finds a way to use this visit as a bridge, or the visit becomes another public reminder that the bridge is still broken. And that is why the Kate angle matters so much. Because Kate has always occupied a very unusual place in this family drama. She is close enough to William to understand the depth of his anger. She is close enough to the monarchy to understand the risk of every move being read as a signal. And she is also a mother, someone who knows that children do not stay little while adults wait for the perfect moment to forgive each other. That is the part of the story that makes it harder to dismiss as just another royal feud. Because adults can spend years defending their positions. They can say the timing is wrong. They can say the wounds are too fresh. They can say trust has been broken. They can say they need more time. But children grow during all of that. Archie is no longer the baby the world first saw in 2019. Lilibet is no longer just a name in a palace statement. They are growing up with a royal family that exists mostly as images, stories, and distant relatives. And if Kate is truly pushing for William to meet them, then this is not only about Harry and William. It is about whether the next generation is allowed to inherit the silence of the last one. That is a much heavier question. And it is why this visit feels less like a routine royal headline and more like a countdown. Because once the trip begins, every movement will be watched. Every absence will be noticed. Every silence will be interpreted. If Harry is in Britain and there is no meeting, people will not see that as neutral. They will see it as an answer. They will say William had the chance and did not take it. They will say Kate tried and could not move him. They will say the family had an opening and let it close. But if even a small meeting happens, even a private one, even a brief one, it could become the first real sign that this frozen story can still move. And that is why, before we get into the security drama, the palace hesitation, and William's resistance, we have to start with Kate. Because she may be the one person in this story who understands that the visit is not just about logistics. It is about time. And time may be the one thing this family keeps losing. If you follow royal stories not just for the gossip, but for the human consequences behind the polished images, make sure you are subscribed, because this is exactly the kind of moment where the small details matter more than the official statements. Now, the public version of this story is easy to understand. Prince Harry wants to come to the United Kingdom. He has public and private engagements connected to charities, veterans, and the Invictus world. There is also the deeply personal question of whether he can bring Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet with him, and whether the children might finally reconnect with their grandfather, King Charles. But the public version is not the whole story. The public version says this is about security. And yes, security is real. It is not decoration. It is not just an excuse that can be brushed aside. Harry has spent years arguing that his family cannot safely move around the United Kingdom without appropriate protection. The legal fight over his security has been long, bitter, and very public. The courts have not given him the outcome he wanted, but the argument itself has never gone away. So when people hear that the children may not come, or that the plans may change, or that the visit may be scaled back, the first explanation is obvious: security. But family stories are rarely only about the official reason. Sometimes the official reason is the door. The private emotion is what is behind it. And behind this door, there is the question of William. Because even if Harry solves the practical problem, even if the travel works, even if the children are brought close enough for a family reunion to be possible, that still does not mean William will agree to step into the room. That is where Kate enters the story. Reports suggest that Kate would like to see Archie and Lilibet herself, and that she has been encouraging William to consider a meeting. That detail is powerful because it puts Kate in a position we do not often see publicly. Not just the calm figure beside the future king, not just the careful princess who says the right thing at the right moment, but the person inside the marriage who may be saying, "This cannot go on forever." And if that is true, it means Kate is trying to do something very delicate. She is not simply trying to help Harry. She is not choosing Harry over William. That would be too simple, and honestly, too unrealistic. Kate's first loyalty in this family structure is naturally to her husband, their children, and the future they are expected to carry. But sometimes loyalty does not mean agreeing with silence. Sometimes loyalty means telling someone you love that the cost of holding the line is getting too high. For William, the cost of meeting Harry may feel obvious. He may fear that any private gesture will become public. He may worry that a softening will be used, interpreted, leaked, spun, or turned into another chapter of the Sussex story. After everything that has happened, after the interviews, the documentary, the memoir, the accusations, and the years of mistrust, it is not hard to understand why William would be cautious. But for Kate, the cost of not meeting may now be just as obvious. If William does not see the children, then the distance becomes more than a feud between brothers. It becomes a family pattern. It becomes something the children grow around. It becomes normal. And once something becomes normal in a family, it is very hard to undo. That is the emotional argument Kate may be making behind closed doors. Not that William has to forget everything. Not that Harry has handled everything perfectly. Not that the past suddenly does not matter. But that there are children involved now, and children should not have to wait for adults to finish being angry. That is the key difference between this angle and the usual royal coverage. Most commentary treats the Sussex-Wales conflict like a scorecard. Who won? Who lost? Who embarrassed whom? Who looked stronger? Who looked colder? Who leaked? Who briefed? Who is more popular this week? But Kate's possible role changes the frame. It shifts the story from punishment to prevention. She may not be trying to create a grand reconciliation between two brothers who are not ready for it. She may be trying to prevent the next generation from becoming strangers before they ever had a chance to know each other. And that is much harder to attack. Because even people who are tired of Harry, even people who strongly support William, can understand the sadness of cousins and grandparents and uncles becoming abstract figures instead of real relationships. This is where Kate has a kind of soft power that no one else in the family has. King Charles can invite, he can hope, he can signal that the door is open. But he is the monarch, and every personal gesture from him carries institutional weight. If Charles moves toward Harry, people ask what it means for the crown, for forgiveness, for public trust, for the future of the monarchy. William can decide, but William is also the injured brother. His emotions are the barrier as much as his authority is the key. Harry can ask, but Harry is also the person William feels hurt by. Coming from Harry, Even a sincere request may be heard through years of anger. Kate is different. Kate can speak to William not as a palace official, not as a public commentator, and not as a rival in the family drama. She can speak as the person who has lived beside him through the fallout. She has seen what this has done to him. She has seen how the public pressure works. She has also seen how quickly life can change, how quickly certainty can disappear, and how little control anyone really has over time. That gives her words a different weight. And it may explain why this particular moment matters. The family has already lived through losses that should have reminded everyone how fragile time is. The death of Queen Elizabeth brought Harry and William into the same public space, but it did not heal the fracture. The king's illness created another emotional opening, but even that has not produced a full repair. Years have passed, and the brothers still appear to be living in separate emotional countries. So if Kate is now trying to push for a meeting, it may be because she sees the pattern. Big events happen. Everyone wonders if this will be the moment. The world watches. The family gets close to a possible thaw. Then nothing truly changes. And each time nothing changes, the next attempt becomes harder. That is why the July window feels so important. It is not because one visit can magically heal everything. It cannot. A private meeting would not erase Spare. It would not erase the Oprah interview. It would not erase the Netflix series. It would not erase the briefings, the hurt, the suspicion, or the years of silence. But a meeting could do one thing. It could prove that the door is not locked. And in a family this frozen, that would matter. Because right now, the public assumption is that William will not move, that he is done, that he sees Harry as a source of chaos, pain, and risk, that he is willing to maintain distance for as long as necessary, even if that means missing years of his nephew's and niece's childhood. Kate's reported push challenges that assumption. It suggests there may be a conversation happening inside the Wales household that is more complicated than the public image. It suggests that not everyone around William sees continued distance as the only option. And it suggests that Kate may be trying to create a narrow path between two extremes, pretending everything is fine and refusing to allow any contact at all. That narrow path is where this whole story lives, because no one serious believes William and Harry are about to return to the old days overnight. No one expects the brothers to suddenly appear together laughing, relaxed, and completely healed. That would feel fake because the wound is too deep. But a private meeting with children is different. It does not require a full public reconciliation. It does not require speeches. It does not require William to endorse Harry's choices or Harry to withdraw every criticism he has ever made. It simply requires the adults to say, for a short time, we will allow family to be bigger than the feud. And maybe that is why Kate's role is so interesting. She is not trying to win the argument. She may be trying to change the question. Instead of asking, does William forgive Harry? The question becomes, can William meet the children? Instead of asking, is the royal rift over? The question becomes, can one human moment happen before the visit ends? Instead of asking, who is right? The question becomes, how long should children pay for adult conflict? That is a completely different emotional landscape, and it is far more powerful than another headline about who was invited, who was snubbed, or who sat where. But here is the problem. Kate may have influence, but she does not have the final vote. And if William is still resisting, then the whole plan may fail before it even reaches the room. Because for William, this is not only about meeting two children, it is about what that meeting represents. It is about whether he is ready to reopen a connection to Harry, even indirectly. It is about whether he believes a private moment can stay private. It is about whether he can separate Archie and Lilibet from everything he feels about their parents. That is not a small emotional task. And this is where the story becomes more tense, because Kate may see a closing window, Harry may see a chance, Charles may see a possible reunion with his grandchildren, the public may see a dramatic royal thaw, but William may see danger. Not physical danger, emotional danger, public danger, family danger. The danger of stepping forward and feeling exposed again. And if that is what he feels, then Kate's quiet mission becomes much harder than it looks. because she is not just asking William to attend a meeting, she is asking him to trust a moment. And trust is the one thing this family has almost completely lost. And that is why William's resistance cannot be treated as a simple refusal. It would be easy to say, he should just do it. It would be easy to say, they are brothers, children are involved, enough is enough. And emotionally, many people will feel exactly that. They will look at the situation and think, how many years can this continue? How many birthdays, Christmases, family milestones, illnesses, funerals, and public events have to pass before someone decides that the Cold War has gone too far? But William is not looking at this from the outside. He is not seeing the story as a viewer sees it. He is seeing it as someone who believes he has already been burned. From William's perspective, the rupture did not happen in one dramatic moment. It built slowly, then publicly, then painfully. There was the decision by Harry and Meghan to step back from royal duties. There were negotiations, statements, interviews, accusations, and then the impossible problem of family pain becoming global entertainment. There was the Oprah interview. There was the Netflix series. There was Harry's memoir. There were deeply personal claims that William would never have expected to hear discussed in front of millions of people. So when people ask why William cannot simply agree to a meeting, they may be missing the emotional math he is doing. For him, a meeting is not just a meeting. It could feel like opening the door to another round of public interpretation. It could feel like taking a private risk in a family where privacy has already been shattered. It could feel like giving Harry a symbolic victory, even if Harry does not intend it that way. It could feel like stepping into a room where one wrong expression, one awkward silence, one tiny detail could later become part of someone else's narrative. That does not mean William is right to resist, but it explains why Kate's mission is so difficult. Because she is not trying to persuade a man who is simply being stubborn. She may be trying to persuade a man who believes caution is the only way to protect his family, his future, and the monarchy he will one day lead. And that is where the royal dimension makes a private family issue almost impossible. In most families, a brother can meet another brother's children quietly. It can be awkward, it can be imperfect, it can happen in a living room, at a relative's house, over tea, with nobody outside the family knowing for months. The adults can decide later what it meant. But this family does not have that luxury. If William meets Harry's children, the world will hear about it sooner or later. If Kate sees Archie and Lilibet, people will read meaning into it. If Charles sees them and William does not, people will read meaning into that too. If Harry comes to Britain and no meeting happens, that becomes a message. If a meeting does happen, that also becomes a message. Silence becomes a message. Absence becomes a message. Even a car arriving at the wrong gate becomes a message. That is the trap Kate is trying to work inside. She may want a human moment, but she has to negotiate the machinery around that moment. The diaries, the security, the locations, the optics, the briefings, the fear that one side will say too much and the other side will feel betrayed again. And then there is the question of the children themselves. Archie and Lilibet are not props in this story. They are not symbols, even if the public conversation often turns them into symbols. They are children, and that means any meeting with William and Kate would need to be handled with care. It cannot be treated like a dramatic summit. It cannot be framed as a peace treaty. It cannot be loaded with the emotional expectations of millions of strangers. And yet, that is exactly what the public will do. The public will turn it into a peace treaty. That is why William may hesitate, because once children are involved, the emotional stakes go up. A failed meeting would be worse than no meeting at all. A tense encounter, an uncomfortable leak, or a sense that the children were pulled into an adult drama could deepen the fracture instead of softening it. So Kate's challenge is not simply to persuade William to say yes. Her challenge is to make the meeting feel safe enough for him to believe it will not become another wound. And that is a much harder conversation. It may sound something like this: no cameras, no announcements, no palace victory lap, no public pressure, no emotional ambush, no expectation that one meeting fixes everything. Just a beginning. But even a beginning can be frightening when the past has been so public. That is why this early July visit feels so loaded. It compresses years of unresolved pain into a few days. Harry may be in the country, the king may want to see his grandchildren, Kate may be quietly urging William to consider the bigger picture. The children may be close enough for a meeting to be physically possible. And yet everything still depends on whether William is willing to cross the emotional distance. This is the part of the story where the security issue becomes more than background noise. Because security is not just a practical obstacle, it is also a symbol of the entire Sussex problem. For Harry, security has become proof that his concerns are not being taken seriously. He has argued for years that he cannot safely bring his family to the United Kingdom without the right level of protection. He has said, in different ways, that Britain is still his home, but that he does not feel he can show that home to his children safely. For the government and the security system, the issue is different. Harry is no longer a full-time working royal. His protection is assessed differently now. The courts have upheld that a tailored arrangement can be lawful, even if Harry strongly disagrees with it. The system does not simply return him to the status he had before he stepped back. And for the palace, the security fight is a nightmare because it keeps dragging private family hopes into public institutional arguments. If Harry says the children cannot come because security is not enough, that sounds like a family tragedy. If officials say the security decisions are made independently and properly, that sounds like procedure. If the palace offers accommodation on a royal estate, Harry's side can still say accommodation is not the same as protection. And suddenly, a grandfather seeing his grandchildren becomes tangled in government procedure, court rulings, police protection, royal status, and public anger. That is the world Kate is operating in. She may want William to think about Archie and Lilibet, but the moment she does, the practical question appears immediately. Where would this meeting happen? Who would know? Who would protect the family moving to and from the place? Would it be on royal property? Would it be private? Would Meghan be there? Would Harry be there? Would Charles be involved? Would the children be told this is a casual visit, or would the emotional meaning be impossible to hide? Every answer creates another question, and the clock is still ticking. That is what makes the last window concept so strong here. Not because this is literally the final chance forever. Families can surprise us. People can soften. Circumstances can change. But, emotionally, it may feel like one of the last clean opportunities before the story hardens again. Because the longer William goes without seeing Archie and Lilibet, the easier it becomes to keep not seeing them. Distance becomes habit. Habit becomes position. Position becomes identity. And then, one day, the absence is no longer shocking. It is simply the way the family works. That may be what Kate is trying to prevent. And honestly, this is why her possible role feels so different from the rest of the royal drama. Kate has spent years being described in terms of steadiness, duty, and control. She rarely gives the public dramatic emotional statements. She does not normally pull focus in family conflict. She does not build her image around open confrontation. So, if she is pushing behind the scenes, it would fit a very Kate-like style of influence. Quiet, personal, strategic. Not loud enough to create another scandal, but persistent enough to matter. And that may be exactly why William might listen. Not because Kate can force him, she cannot, but because she can speak to the part of him that is not only a future king, not only an injured brother, but also a father. William knows what it means for children to grow up inside royal pressure. He knows what it means for childhood to be shaped by public events, by family breakdown, by grief, by the constant awareness that private pain can become public history. He and Harry both know that better than almost anyone. That is the tragedy of this whole situation. The two brothers who understand the damage of family rupture better than most people are now living through another rupture in front of their own children. And that is where Kate's argument may become emotionally powerful. She could say, not in public, not in a speech, but privately, "You do not have to fix everything with Harry. But do not let the children become strangers." That line, if it is anything close to what she is feeling, is the whole video. Because it separates reconciliation from responsibility. William may not be ready to reconcile with Harry, but could he be ready to meet Archie and Lilibet? Could he separate the children from the conflict? Could he allow George, Charlotte, and Louis to have some future understanding of their cousins, even if the adults are still working through the damage? That is the question, and it is not an easy one. Because in royal families, children are never just children in the public imagination. They represent lines of succession, competing households, future narratives, and the emotional health of the monarchy itself. Archie and Lilibet may live in California, but they are still part of the royal family story. They are still grandchildren of the king. They are still niece and nephew to the future king. Their absence from British family life is not just personal, it is visible. And visibility matters in monarchy. The monarchy survives partly through symbols. Family unity is one of those symbols. Continuity is another. Generations standing together, even briefly, send a message of stability. When those generations are separated, when children are absent, when cousins do not appear together, when brothers cannot be in the same room, the opposite message starts to form. That message is dangerous because it suggests not just disagreement, but decay. It suggests the family cannot manage its own wounds. And that is why a private meeting could carry public importance, even if nobody officially confirms it. A single meeting would not solve the monarchy's problems. It would not end criticism of Harry and Meghan. It would not repair William's trust. It would not remove the security dispute. But it could interrupt the narrative that nothing can ever change. And sometimes, interrupting the narrative is the first step. That may be what Kate sees. She may understand that the family does not need a perfect reconciliation right now. It needs evidence of movement. It needs one moment that stops the story from becoming permanently stuck. But again, there is the other side. William may believe that movement without trust is dangerous, and if he believes that, he may decide that saying no is not cruelty. He may see it as protection, protection of his wife, protection of his children, protection of his father, protection of the institution, protection of his own peace. That is why judging this from the outside is complicated. The emotional answer and the strategic answer may not be the same. The human part of the story says, meet the children, do not waste the chance. The strategic part says, be careful, because one meeting can open a door you may not be able to close. Kate's role is compelling because she stands between those two instincts. She understands the strategic caution. She has lived inside the royal system long enough to know how easily one small thing becomes a storm. But she also understands the human cost, and perhaps more than anyone, she knows William well enough to see when caution is turning into permanent distance. That is the tension the video should keep alive. Not Kate good, William bad. Not Harry innocent, William cruel. The stronger version is more complicated and more emotional. Kate may be trying to protect the future from the past. William may be trying to protect the present from another betrayal. And Harry may be trying to bring his children into a family that still does not know how to receive him. That is the triangle. And it is much more interesting than another flat argument over who deserves security or who owes whom an apology. This is where viewers will stay with the story, because it is no longer just about royal news. It is about a family pattern many people recognize. Someone tries to soften the conflict. Someone else is not ready. Children are used as the reason to try again, but also as the reason to be careful. Everyone has a point, and yet the situation still hurts. That is the kind of royal story that keeps people watching because it does not resolve easily. And if you have a strong view on this is the moment to put it in the comments. Should William agree to see Archie and Lilibet even if he is not ready to reconcile with Harry? Or are the two things impossible to separate at this point? Because that question is really the heart of the next few days. If Harry comes alone, or if Meghan and the children stay away, the story becomes one kind of drama. It becomes another painful chapter in the security dispute. It becomes another example of how unresolved protection arrangements keep the Sussex children away from Britain. But if there is even a chance that the children come for part of the visit, even briefly, then every decision around William becomes sharper. Charles may want to see them. That part is emotionally easy to understand. He is their grandfather. He is also a king facing his own health challenges, and time has become a more visible factor in his life. The idea that he would want to see Archie and Lilibet is not difficult to believe. But William is different. A meeting with Charles can be framed as grandfather and grandchildren. A meeting with William would be interpreted as a major shift in the sibling feud. Even if the children are the emotional reason, Harry is still attached to the moment. There is no way around that. And that may be the wall Kate keeps running into. William might ask, if I agree, what exactly am I agreeing to? A private hello? A family visit? A signal of thawing relations? A step toward Harry? A risk of headlines saying the brothers are healing? A risk of headlines saying Kate forced the peace? A risk of being blamed if the meeting does not lead to more? This is why a yes is not simple. But a no is not simple either. If William refuses, that refusal will speak loudly, even if nobody says it out loud. It will suggest that the rift is not only with Harry and Meghan, but has extended to the children. It will suggest that whatever affection once existed between the brothers has been buried so deeply that even the next generation cannot soften it. That would be a devastating public image. And Kate, more than anyone, may understand the power of that image. Because Kate's own public image has always been tied to family stability. She represents continuity, calm, motherhood, and the future of the monarchy through George, Charlotte, and Louis. She knows how much the public responds to images of children growing up within the royal story. First days of school, Christmas walks, balcony appearances, small waves, cousin moments, family traditions. So the absence of Archie and Lilibet is not invisible to her. It leaves a gap, and that gap grows every year. If Kate wants to see them, it may not be only sentiment. It may be a recognition that the royal family cannot keep speaking the language of family while leaving part of the family permanently outside the frame. That does not mean Archie and Lilibet need to become working royals. That is not the point. Their future is clearly different. Their parents chose a different life. They are growing up outside the institution. But outside the institution does not have to mean outside the family. That is the distinction Kate may be trying to preserve. And if she can persuade William to see that distinction, the visit could become something more than another round of royal tension. It could become the first small correction in a story that has been moving in the same painful direction for too long. But for that to happen, William would have to accept a very uncomfortable idea. He would have to accept that meeting the children is not the same as surrendering to Harry. He would have to accept that kindness is not weakness. He would have to accept that a private moment does not have to become a public defeat. And perhaps hardest of all, he would have to accept that refusing to move also carries risk. Because there is a risk in saying yes. But there is also a risk in becoming the person who always says no. That risk is emotional. It is reputational. It is historical. Years from now, people may not remember every detail of the security arrangements. They may not remember every court ruling, every statement, every briefing, every palace denial. But they may remember that there was a time when Harry's children were young, when Charles was ill, when Kate reportedly wanted a meeting, when the family had a narrow opening, and William did not take it. That is the kind of judgment history can make very coldly. And maybe Kate sees that too. Maybe she sees not only the pain of today, but the story that will be told later. Because royal families do not just live events, they become narratives. Every choice is eventually folded into a larger meaning. Elizabeth's restraint became part of her legend. Diana's pain became part of hers. Charles's waiting became part of his. William and Harry's brotherhood, once one of the monarchy's most emotionally powerful stories, is now at risk of becoming a warning about what happens when grief turns into distance and distance turns into identity. Kate's possible mission is an attempt to interrupt that ending. And that is why the next part of this story matters so much. Because the visit itself is not just a calendar event. It is a pressure test. It will show whether the family can still create one private human opening under the weight of public history, or whether the weight is now too heavy. That pressure test begins before the most emotional decision is even made. Because if Harry travels during this July 6th to July 10th window, the story will start moving before anyone confirms a single private meeting. The cameras will not need a palace statement. The speculation will begin with the first arrival, the first sighting, the first report that he is in the country, or that he is not coming alone, or that the children are not with him. And from that point on, every hour becomes part of the drama. That is what makes this visit so different from a normal royal appearance. A speech can be scheduled, a charity event can be announced, A public engagement can be explained in a press release, but a family reunion, especially one this sensitive, lives in the spaces between official events. It lives in what is not said. It lives in who is not photographed. It lives in whether one side leaves a door open and the other side walks through it. For Kate, that may be the real race against time, not the public schedule, but the private window inside it. The few hours where a meeting could happen quietly. The short stretch where William could say yes without it becoming a production. The possibility that the children could meet their uncle and aunt without being made responsible for healing the entire monarchy. And this is where the story becomes almost painfully human. Because the public wants a dramatic answer. Did the brothers reconcile? Yes or no? Did Kate succeed? Yes or no? Did Harry bring the children? Yes or no? Did the king see them? Yes or no? But families rarely move that cleanly. Sometimes the first step is not a reconciliation. Sometimes it is just permission for the next step to exist. A text answered. A room agreed to. A visit kept private. A child allowed to meet someone they have mostly known as a name. That might not satisfy the public appetite for drama, but it would matter more than 1,000 headlines. And if Kate is pushing for that kind of small beginning, it may be because she knows a public breakthrough is too much to ask for right now. She may know William is not ready for a grand emotional reset. She may know Harry and William cannot suddenly sit down and unpack years of pain under the glare of the world. So the more realistic goal is smaller. Let the children in. Let one family moment happen. Let the future have a different memory than the past. That is why the two possible outcomes feel so stark. In the first scenario, Kate manages to persuade William, not with pressure, not with a public campaign, not with anyone humiliating him into it, but with a private argument that lands in the right place. She convinces him that seeing Archie and Lilibet does not mean forgetting what happened. It does not mean trusting Harry completely. It does not mean opening the palace gates to every unresolved grievance. It simply means refusing to let the children become permanent strangers. If that happens, even quietly, the entire emotional temperature of the story changes. Suddenly the visit is no longer only about security. It is no longer only about legal defeats, protective arrangements, and the old Sussex-Wales war. It becomes the first real sign that someone inside the family has found a way to separate the children from the conflict. And that would be a major shift, because for years, the rift has been described as almost total. The brothers do not speak in any meaningful way. Trust is gone. The wives are distant. The households are separate. The public images are separate. The futures look separate. But a meeting with the children would create a crack in that wall. Not a collapse, a crack. And sometimes a crack is all a family needs to remember that a wall was built by people, and people can change it. In that first scenario, Kate becomes the quiet force who made the impossible slightly less impossible. She does not need to be seen entering the room. She does not need to give an interview. She does not need anyone to say she saved the day. Her influence would be visible in the fact that the meeting happened at all. That is exactly why this angle is stronger than the usual royal scandal coverage. It gives the audience someone to root for without pretending the story is simple. It gives Kate a role that feels active but believable, not a fairy tale peacemaker waving away years of conflict, but a strategic, emotionally intelligent person trying to stop one more piece of the family from freezing into place. And if that meeting did happen, even if it stayed private, it would raise a bigger question. If William can meet the children once, could he meet them again? If Kate can see Archie and Lilibet, could George, Charlotte, and Louis one day know their cousins? If the family can protect one private moment, could they protect another? That is how reconciliation often begins, not with a speech, but with evidence that the worst outcome is not inevitable. But the second scenario is much colder. In that scenario, Kate tries and William does not move. Harry comes or tries to come, and the family remains divided. The king may or may not see his grandchildren. The security issue continues to dominate the public conversation. And William's silence becomes the loudest part of the visit. Because if there is no meeting, people will not simply say the diaries did not align. They will say William refused. They will say Kate could not change his mind. They will say the children were close enough to become part of the family story. And still, the door stayed shut. That may not be fair in every detail. Real families are complicated. Security arrangements are complicated. Schedules are complicated. The truth behind palace doors is almost always more layered than the headline version. But public perception does not wait for perfect context. And perception is brutal in moments like this. If the visit passes with no visible sign of movement, the message many viewers will take away is that the rift has hardened again. Not just between Harry and William, but around the children. That would make the next attempt even harder, because the failed attempt becomes part of the story. The next time someone says there could be a reunion, people will remember this visit. They will remember the window. They will remember Kate's reported role. They will remember that nothing happened. And that is why the stakes feel bigger than one family meeting. This visit may decide whether the public still believes a reunion is possible. That matters because royal stories are powered by belief. People believe in continuity. They believe in family tradition. They believe in the idea that, beneath all the protocol and titles, there is still a human family trying to hold itself together. But belief can wear out. If every possible opening closes, the audience stops expecting repair. They stop watching for warmth. They start watching only for damage. And that is a dangerous place for any royal family to be. Because once the public stops believing in the possibility of healing, every future gesture looks calculated. Every smile looks staged. Every silence looks permanent. Kate's reported effort pushes against that cynicism. It says, maybe someone still thinks this is worth saving. Maybe someone inside the family still believes the children should not inherit the full weight of the feud. Maybe someone understands that the monarchy cannot only survive through duty. It also needs moments that look recognizably human. And that is where the security backdrop makes the story even heavier. Harry's security fight is often framed as a dispute about privilege, and for some viewers, that is exactly how it feels. They hear the word protection, they hear taxpayer money, they hear royal status, and they think this is another argument about what Harry gave up and what he still expects. But for Harry, the issue is existential. He has repeatedly argued that the risk to him and his family did not disappear because he stopped being a full-time working royal. In his view, the threat follows the person, not the job title. And whether people agree with him or not, that belief shapes every decision about bringing his children to Britain. So when the security issue sits beside the family reunion question, the emotional pressure doubles. Because Harry may be saying, I want my children to know this family, but I need to believe they are safe. William may be saying, I understand the children matter, but I need to believe this private moment will not become another public problem. Kate may be saying, both fears are real, but the children are growing up while the adults keep waiting. And Charles may be watching all of it, with the terrible awareness that time is no longer an abstract idea. That is why this story does not need exaggeration. The facts, the timing, and the emotional logic are already enough. A king who may want to see his grandchildren, a prince who says security determines whether his family can return, a future king who has not been ready to reopen the door, a princess who may be trying to create one narrow path before the chance disappears, and two children at the center of a drama they did not create. If this video is useful, hit like, because it tells the algorithm to show more royal stories that look past the obvious scandal and into the human stakes underneath it. Now, the final question is not whether Kate can magically heal the royal rift. She cannot. No one can do that in one visit. Not Kate, not Charles, not Harry, not William. A feud this deep is not solved by one meeting, one phone call, one lunch, or one carefully worded statement. The real question is smaller, and that is why it matters. Can Kate help create one moment where the feud does not win? Just one. One moment where William does not have to forgive everything, but also does not have to keep the children outside the door. One moment where Harry does not get everything he wants, but his children are allowed to touch a piece of the family they have mostly seen from far away. One moment where Charles is not only the king managing a crisis, but a grandfather watching time move too quickly. One moment where Kate's quiet influence does what public pressure, old grief, and years of royal strategy have failed to do. That is why the next few days matter, because if Kate succeeds, the story changes. Not completely, not cleanly, not into some perfect royal reunion that erases everything that came before. but enough to show that the family is not entirely trapped by its own history. And if she fails, that also changes the story. It confirms that the rift is still stronger than the children, stronger than the king's wishes, stronger than Kate's influence, and stronger than the rare opportunity created by Harry being in Britain. That would be a very different message, and it would be hard to soften later. So as the July visit approaches, do not only watch the security headlines, watch the spaces around them. Watch whether the palace leaves room for something private. Watch whether William's silence changes shape. Watch whether Kate's name starts appearing not as decoration in the story, but as the quiet reason a meeting may still be possible. Because in a family where almost every public move is analyzed, the most important decision may happen far from the cameras. It may happen in a private conversation between husband and wife. It may happen in a moment where Kate says, in effect, the children should not have to wait forever. And it may come down to whether William can hear that not as pressure, but as truth. The world is watching for a reunion between brothers. But the real test may be whether an uncle is willing to meet the children before another chance slips away. And if Kate is truly fighting for that, then this is not just another royal scandal. It is a race against time. The visit will tell us whether the door opens even a little, or whether, once again, the family stands close enough to reach each other and still lets the moment pass.